Giannis to the Heat, Brown to the 76ers, Ja to the Blazers. This offseason has been crazy. Now it's time to grade every NBA team's offseason. Let's go. First team we're going to be breaking down is the Atlanta Hawks. Looking at their biggest move this offseason, they re-signed CJ McCollum to a 1-year, $21 million deal. Looking at McCollum's stats last year, he averaged 18.7 points along with 3.9 rebounds, and he was their best player in their series against the Knicks in the playoffs. McCollum was brought over in the trade by Trae Young, where Trae Young got sent to Washington, and Atlanta got CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert in return. Now looking at the Hawks draft, with their first round pick, they selected Kingston Flemings, a guard from Houston. I think this was a solid pick, probably the best available player at that point of the draft. They also selected Zuby Equifor from St. John's with the 23rd pick, and in their second round, they selected Narcisse Nouveau from France. Now, for the Hawks grade this offseason, I'm going to be giving the Hawks a B. I don't think the Hawks had a great offseason. I think they have a B minus. That's where I'm going to put them. I think they could have done a little better in the free agency, only signing 2 free agents with Devin Carter and Aaron Wiggins, who are going to be rotation players for them this season. I think they could have done a little more damage in free agency. Now, moving on to the next team, the Boston Celtics, who made one of the biggest trades. I'm not going to say the biggest, but one of the biggest trades this offseason, sending Jaylen Brown to the 76ers for Paul George in return. I give this trade a C minus in my grade on this trade, but let's look at their re-signings first. Ron Harper Jr. and Neemias Queta. Neemias Queta was re-signed to a 4-year, $56 million deal, which was a huge for the Celtics, because Neemias Queta had a great year for the Celtics. He wasn't expected to have a big year for the Celtics, as they lost Porzingis last offseason, but Queta stepped up in that position and showed the Celtics that he can be a starter player. Now, further additions, they signed Mike Conley to a short one-year deal. They got Paul George from the 76ers in the Jaylen Brown trade, and their biggest signing was Mitchell Robinson on a 3-year, $47 million deal, who was on the championship winning team, the New York Knicks, last year. Vucevic left the Celtics after he was traded for Anthony Simons at the trade deadline. The Celtics this offseason, I'm going to give them a C. I don't think they had a great offseason with Jaylen Brown departing, but I feel like Brown was going to eventually leave after the Giannis trade fell through. Now, the next team we're going to talk about, the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Brooklyn Nets re-signed Josh Minute, Darian Sharp, both to 2-year deals. Now, in free agency, they signed Kean Ellis to a 2-year deal. They got Julius Randle with the trade, with the 3-team trade with the Timberwolves, Bulls, and the Nets, and they signed Moritz Wagner from the Magic. So you lost Nick Claxton, who was probably your best player last season, and now let's look at their draft. So the Nets, their draft, they picked up Mike Brown Jr. from Louisville with the 6th pick. I don't love this pick for them. They have so many guards on their team. I don't think this was a position of need. I don't think this was the best draft for them either. With another guard, Isaiah Evans from Duke. 2 guards with their first 2 picks. This offseason for the Knicks was really bad, in my opinion. You lost your best player. You got a really old Julius Randle from the Timberwolves, and you didn't do well in the draft. I'm going to give the Brooklyn Nets this offseason a D. I think it was a really bad offseason for the Nets. Maybe they're going to prove me wrong, but the guards on your team, having selected so many guards in last year's draft and then 2 more guards this year's draft, I just don't see where they're going. Now, the next team, the Charlotte Hornets. So Kobe White re-signs with the Hornets. I think this is a great re-signing for the Hornets. But the trade, LaMelo Ball was sent to the Timberwolves, and in return you got Naz Reid and 2 first-round picks. I don't love this offseason. You also lost Miles Bridges after you traded in the Suns. I don't see why the Hornets needed to do this. You just finally got competitive again with Concanipple and LaMelo Ball as your 2 star players. And now you trade LaMelo and you trade Miles Bridges. Like, I don't see the point here. You finally get going. You make the play-in, and you almost make the playoffs. But then you trade everyone? Like, I'm not seeing the vision here. Let's look at their draft to maybe understand some more. You take Haynes Steinbach and Christian Anderson Jr. with the 14th pick. From Washington, a forward. Let's look at his stats for Washington last season. Washington was not a great basketball school. He averaged 18.5 points. Not a bad college career. A one and done in college. And then your other pick in this draft was Christian Anderson Jr. from Texas Tech. So you had 2 first-round picks. This wasn't a bad pick. I think this might be your LaMelo Ball replacement here, Christian Anderson Jr. But I don't love this offseason from the Hornets. Now, I do think it's a tad bit better than the Nets, but I think it's worse than the Celtics because you don't bring in anyone new, really. So I'm going to put this down low C tier. for the Hornets. Now, the next team, the Chicago Bulls. You re-sign Zach Collins, one of your older veterans, to the team. You add Nick Claxton from the Nets. You add Norman Powell from the Heat. But you lose Anthony Simons, which I thought was a huge piece for them. You lose Colin Sexton, which was another big piece for them. So you lose two big guards. But you add Norman Powell. Now let's look at their draft. And the Bulls in their draft selected Caleb Wilson with the 4th pick from UNC. Dalen Swain from Texas with the 15th pick. Braden Smith from Purdue with the 8th pick. I think the Bulls killed this draft. In my opinion, this was the best draft. You got Caleb Wilson, you got Dalen Swain, and you got Braden Smith. 3 amazing college players. So I think even though you lost Anthony Simons and Colin Sexton, you bring in Nick Claxton, you bring in Norman Powell, and then you get a forward and 2 guards in this draft. This was an amazing offseason, in my opinion, from the Bulls. I'm going to give them an A-. Now, let's look at the next team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So the Cavs are one of the runners for LeBron James right now. So this is a tough grade for me. Because if you bring in LeBron James, after you just extended Donovan Mitchell to a 4-year deal, this is an amazing offseason. But right now you lose Keon Ellis, you lose Dean Wade. Dean Wade was one of your rotation players. And you don't add anyone. So I think that LeBron is going to go to Cleveland. But for this offseason right now for Cleveland, I'm just going to give them a B. I think they had a worse offseason than the Hawks. But the Cavs are almost there this season. We saw them make it to the semifinal, Eastern Conference Finals. But we didn't see them get the next step. So can LeBron come to Cleveland and bring them that next step? We'll see very soon. The next team, the Dallas Mavericks, re-signing nobody and only adding Santi Amada from the Grizzlies. But you lose Marvin Bagley. You lose A.J. Johnson. Let's check out their draft. You add Moritz Johnson from Michigan, the national champions. You add Koa Pete, who I thought fell way too far. I was really high on Koa Pete entering this draft. And you add Toby Lawle from Virginia Tech in the second round. A solid draft for them, adding 2 fours. But where is Dallas going right now? You don't really have that star player. You lose Anthony Davis. You lose Luka Doncic 2 years ago. Where is Dallas going? And I don't think this offseason's good enough. You don't really add anyone. And we know LeBron's not going to go to Dallas. So for Dallas this year, I think you had a solid draft, but I'm going to put them in C tier. I think they had a worse offseason than the Hornets. Let's look at our next team. The Denver Nuggets, who I earlier thought was where LeBron was going to go to. They re-signed Tyus Jones. You add Marvin Bagley to a 1-year deal, but you lose Tim Hardaway Jr., who has been on your team for a while now. Now, I think this offseason was fine for the Nuggets, but they won the championship in 2024, but they just haven't really added anybody huge since then. We can look at their draft class to see. I mean, you add Terrence Reed, who was a huge player for UConn in their semifinals, or in their national championship for them. You add Bryce Hopkins from St. John's. But this is not enough for the Nuggets to go contend. I think Marvin Bagley is a great addition for them. So for the Marvin Bagley addition, I'm going to put them at the end of B tier, but I could drop them down to C tier if multiple teams get high into B tier so far. Let's look at our next team. The next team, Detroit Pistons. You re-sign Javonte Green to a 1-year deal. You re-sign Kevin Huerter to a 3-year deal. You add John Collins from a 3-year deal. He left the Clippers. You add Isaiah Jones from the Thunder. But you lose Tobias Harris, who was a huge piece of your team this year. The Pistons were the 1 seed in the East last year. Did they do enough to keep that 1 seed? I don't think they did. So for that reason, we have to look at their draft still. You have 1 pick. You have Kareem Lopez from Mexico, who actually did not like this pick that much. So for that reason, I'm going to have to drop the Detroit down to low D tier. I do not like this offseason from Detroit. Let's look at our next team, which is going to be the Golden State Warriors. You re-sign Al Horford to a 2-year deal. You re-sign DeAnthony Melton to a 2-year deal. You re-sign Porzingis to a 2-year deal. And you lose Quinn and Post to Memphis for some picks. So you re-sign Porzingis and Horford, which were your 2 big signings here. And we can look at their draft and see what they did in the draft. They got Yaxel from Michigan, and you get Lajai Jones from Florida State. Bringing in Yaxel for Golden State is huge. We don't know if Golden State's going to lose Draymond yet. He's still in free agency, but I think he'll come back to them. So for Golden State, I think you had a good draft. I'm going to give them a solid B. I think they had a worse offseason than Cleveland, but a better offseason than Detroit and then Denver. Now, let's look at our next team, which is going to be the Houston Rockets. You bring back Tari Eason, one of your young players, to a 5-year deal. You add Bojan Bogdanovic to a 1-year deal. You add Marcus Smart to a 2-year deal, but you lose Dorian Finney-Smith and you lose Josh Okogie. I don't love this offseason. We can look at their draft here to see what they did. They bring in Jack Khalil from Germany with the 9th pick. I thought this was a 9th pick in the second round, excuse me. So you don't have a first. You bring in 7-footer Yugon Oyanzi, which is every team needs a big guy now. So this might be the Houston's big guy after. We've seen Alfred Sengun not be the player they maybe wanted to be this year. But I don't see them bringing in a huge guy. You don't lose a huge guy. So for that reason, I'm giving the Rockets a C tier. Excuse me, a C tier. Lower than the Mavericks, though. Now, let's look at our next team here. This next team is going to be the Indiana Pacers. Now, I'm just fixing this really quick. Okay, Indiana Pacers. Let's look at what the Indiana Pacers did. Re-signing nobody, adding Kelly Oubre to a 2-year deal from the Sixers. You lose Cam Jones. Let's look at their draft. No picks. Wow. This was a rough offseason for the Pacers. Obviously, Halliburton's going to come back. But what do we think of this? Like, I don't see this. Like, you have just Halliburton. You were going to get a pick. You lost that with the Clippers. Unlucky with the Zubac trade. So for that reason, I'm going to have to give the Pacers the first F of this offseason. A bad offseason, terrible offseason by the Pacers. Let's look at our next team. This next team is going to be the LA Clippers. And look at this. So much happening here for the Clippers. You re-sign Jordan Mitchell. You re-sign Kobe Sanders. 2 young guards that are going to be great for the Clippers. I love these 2 re-signings. You add Rui Hachimura from a 2-year deal in free agency. You add Grady Dick for the trade from the Raptors. You add Brandon Ingram. But you lose Bogdanovic. You lose John Collins. And you lose Kawhi. So you lose 3 old players. And you bring in 3 young players. And you re-sign young players. Let's look at their draft. And see what they were able to do in the draft. You bring in Keaton Wagner with the 5th pick from Illinois. I don't love this pick, to be honest. You bring in Baba Miller in the 2nd. You bring in Henry Vassier from UNC in the 2nd. 2 big centers. But for the Clippers, man, I love this offseason. I'm going to give LA a A tier on this offseason. I know people are indifferent on the Kawhi trade. You lose a 36-year-old and you add Grady Dick, add Brandon Ingram, and add Rui Hachimura. I think those are 3 guys that really can change this Clippers team and push them into the playoffs next season. Now, let's look at the other LA team. You re-sign Austin Reeves to a 4-year deal. You add Quentin Grimes to a 4-year deal. You add Jaden Harvey from the Wizards. You add Walker Kessler to a 4-year deal. You add Colin Sexton. But you lose Rui. You lose Ayton. You lose Jackson Hayes. You lose Luke Kennard. And you lose Marcus Smart. And you lose LeBron James. This was not a good offseason from the Lakers. I know you bring Walker Kessler on. I know you keep Austin Reeves. And Jaden Hardy, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. But, man, losing LeBron James is really going to hurt the Lakers. And you're losing DeAndre and losing Rui. So for that reason, I'm going to give the Lakers a D in this offseason. I'm not going to give it not a C. A D. Very low D. A D minus. I'm not going to give it F. Because you re-sign Austin Reeves. You bring in Walker Kessler. Those are the only 2 reasons I'm keeping it as a D. Now, for the Memphis Grizzlies, re-signing nobody. You add Quinn Post. You add Jeremy Grant. You add A.J. Johnson. You add Chris Murray. But you lose John Morant in that trade. We can look at the... So you add Cam Boozer in the draft. And you add Bennett Sturts. 2 first-round players. 2 players I was really high on in this draft. Cam Boozer, I think, is a little bit overrated in my opinion. But you lose John Morant. But we have a good draft. For that reason, I'm going to give the Grizzlies a C in this offseason. Now, the Miami Heat. You bring in Giannis Antetokounmpo, which is the main thing I'm going to talk about. You re-sign Andrew Wiggins. You bring in Giannis and you bring in Bobby Portis. But you lose Tyler Hero. You lose Jaime. You lose Norman Powell and you lose Khalil Ware. Those are 3 young guys for the Heat. But you bring in Giannis. is that enough to push the Heat to the playoffs, to the finals? And there's rumors LeBron might go to the Heat. But for the Heat, I know a lot of people like this Giannis trade. I don't love it. I'm going to give them a B. I think it's better. I'm going to move the Hawks ahead of them, actually. I think the Hawks had a better offseason than them. But Giannis, man, is Giannis good enough? We can look at their draft, too, see what the Heat did in the draft. You add Nate Ament, who I was not that high on coming into the draft. But I just think that, is Giannis going to pay off for them? We don't know. So the next team we're going to be breaking down is the Milwaukee Bucks. So this offseason, the biggest move has been Giannis leaving the Milwaukee Bucks and joining the Miami Heat. So now let's grade the Bucks offseason. You add Tyler Hero, you add Jaime, and you add Kel'el Ware, and you re-sign Usman Dieng and Babalu Markovic. You lose Giannis and Bobby Portis though, but the Bucks had a rough year last year, so I don't hate this move for them. I feel like Giannis was eventually going to leave, and I think this deal was better than the Jaylen Brown trade, in my opinion, for Milwaukee. Now looking at Milwaukee's draft, Milwaukee selected Byron Burries from Arizona with their first pick. I think this is a very solid pick. I was high on Braden coming into the draft. So I give Milwaukee, I'm going to have a hot take here. I give Milwaukee a high B. I give them a B+. I think Milwaukee did a great job on shipping Giannis here. I think you add Jaime, you add Tyler Hero, and you add Kel'el Ware, and then you add Braden in the draft. I think Milwaukee did a great job at rebuilding, and those four pieces can push Milwaukee, I think, into a high playoff seed, or no, a low playoff seed, somewhere maybe like the 7 seed or the 6 seed, and sneak into the playoffs. The next team we're gonna be grading is Minnesota Timberwolves. The biggest move for them, adding LaMelo Ball from the Hornets and only trading Naz Reid, and then the first round pick swaps. You add Ayo Dosunmu from the Bulls. I love this addition. You add Josh Green, or re-signing. I love this offseason. I know you lose Kyle Anderson, you lose Julius Randle, and you lose Naz Reid, but you add LaMelo Ball, and that's good enough. LaMelo and Ant-Man, I love this offseason. I'm giving this an A+ for Minnesota. I know you lose Naz Reid, but you have LaMelo and Anthony Edwards, and now they are one of my top teams to win the NBA championship next year. The next team we're going to be grading, the New Orleans Pelicans. What do they do this year? Re-sign DeAndre Jordan. And let's look at their draft. They get Jason Pierre Jr. from SMU. Now, this is a terrible offseason. I think that soon Zion is going to have to move from New Orleans. He doesn't like it there. They're not doing anything, and they did nothing this offseason. They get an F from me. Now, the NBA champions, the New York Knicks. Let's grade the Knicks offseason. With your re-signings, you re-sign Jose Alvarado, you re-sign Muhammad Dira, you re-sign Landry Shamet, you add Andrew Drummond, but you lose Mitchell Robinson to Boston. This is a big loss for the Knicks. We can look at their draft. They get Cameron Carr. They get Bruce Thornton from Ohio State, who I was so high on in this draft. This was a steal from the Knicks. Bruce Thornton is one of the best defensive players. And you get Nick Martinelli, one of the best Big Ten players this season. For this draft only, you lose Mitchell Robinson, which is going to lower my grade. But for this draft, I'm going to give them a solid B tier. Now, looking on, we have now the OKC Thunder. They re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein and re-sign Kendrick Williams, which I think are solid. You lose Aaron Wiggins, which was your biggest loss. He was one of your role players. And then in the draft for the Thunder, they get Andy Mara, the 7'3" center from Michigan. What a draft from the Thunder. You pair Andy Mara with SGA. You're going to have Mara be guarding Wemby for the Thunder. For this reason alone, for Mara, I'm going to have to give the Thunder an A tier. This is all you needed to do this offseason. You have the team. You have Shea. You have Jalen Williams. You needed the center. And you got Andy Mara. You still have Hart, but you have Andy Mara now. And now, I think they are going to win the championship this year. Now, looking at the Magic, you bring in Jevon Carter. You bring in Jonathan. You re-sign Jevon Carter. You re-sign Jonathan Isaac. You bring in Vooch. You lose Moritz Wagner. Not Forts Wagner. Moritz. So it's Franz Wagner is the better Wagner. Now we can look at their draft. Nothing huge in free agency. No, not losing anyone huge. You bring in Felix Okapra. I think the Magic aren't the best team right now, to be honest. You re-sign Jonathan Isaac, which is big, and you don't lose anyone. You bring back Vooch. So for that reason, I'm just gonna give them a C tier here. I don't think they had the best offseason, but I don't think they had the worst either. So the next team we're going to be grading is the Philadelphia 76ers. They got Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics this offseason. That was the second biggest trade this offseason. And you get Anthony Simons, which I think is an amazing player. He was amazing for the Celtics earlier this year. You bring in Dean Wade from the Heat, which was a huge, or from the Cavs, excuse me, which was a huge signing. You lose Paul George, you lose Kelly Oubre, and you lose Quentin Grimes. 3 rotation players there, or I guess Paul George was starting. And we can look at the Sixers draft here. They have, with their first round pick, they bring in LeBron Phillip, who was a solid pick, I think. You bring in that guard, he's probably going to be the backup for Maxey and Edgecombe, but you get Jaylen Brown for a great price, and I'm going to have to give the Sixers an A+ here, up with the Timberwolves, Thunder, and the Sixers. Those are my 3 best off seasons. I think the Sixers had an amazing off season, and now they are one of the championship contenders, and they are reportedly in the top 3 for LeBron James in free agency. Comment down below, where do you think he will go, and I'm going to make a video on that as soon as he gets signed. The next team we're going to be talking about is the Phoenix Suns. The Suns now winning in the finals against the Bucks in 2021. Not getting it done though. I mean, Devin Booker's got to leave soon. I feel like you re-sign Mark Williams was your biggest re-signing. You bring Miles Bridges in, which was a huge thing. You lose Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal to the Hornets in that Miles Bridges trade, and you bring in Luke Kennard. We can look at the Suns draft here. Bring in Tyler Nickel in here. I just don't love this offseason, but I don't hate it either. So for that reason, I'm going to have to give the Suns a solid C tier. Now, moving on, the Portland Trailblazers. You re-signed Robert Williams. There was news about him maybe going back to Boston, but it did not. And you bring in John Morant from the Grizzlies. One of the best trades I feel like they could have done. You lost Jeremy Grant and Chris Murray in that trade with the Grizzlies, but John Morant. So for that reason, the Blazers, we have to look at their draft. What am I doing? We have to look at their draft. The Blazers, well, they signed nobody. That's my fault. We don't have to look at their draft, I guess. So you have no picks, but I still give them an A+. The Blazers, I don't think they had as good an offseason as the Timberwolves, the Thunder, or the Sixers, but I think that they are up there still. Now, the Kings. The Kings re-signed Precious Achiuwa. That was their biggest move in free agency, and we can look at their draft. They have Darius Acuff, who fell. I did not think he was going to make it to the Kings, but they did. And they bring in Malik Thomas, also from Arkansas. So you get both of the Arkansas guards, and you get Emmanuel Sharp from Houston. This is a great draft from the Kings, so I'm going to give them a solid B tier. The draft definitely helped the Kings here. And now to the Thunder, who were the finals losers this year. Their biggest move, re-signing Harrison Barnes, but the biggest one, adding Tobias Harris to a tier deal from the Pistons. We can look at the Spurs draft here. Bring in Jaden Quaintness with the first round pick for them. You have some more forwards and guards with their second round picks. I don't love this offseason, so for that reason, I'm going to give the San Antonio Spurs a C tier. Now, let's look at the Raptors. You bring in Kawhi, and you lose Grady Dick, Brandon Ingram. I did not like this Kawhi trade. I wasn't sure why they did it. You bring in Allen Graves, who I wasn't super high on entering this draft. But, I mean, you get Jaden Bradley, who I think fell way too far. But, I mean, I don't love this Kawhi trade. I know you want to bring him back. But for that reason, I'm going to have to give them a D tier, along with the Pistons, the Nets, and the Lakers. I think they all get a D tier, in my opinion. Now we have to do these last 2 teams. The Utah Jazz, who bring in Jackson Hayes, but you lose Walker Kessler. Let's look at the Jazz draft. Darrell Peterson with the second pick. I mean, was this the right pick? Yes, it was. Obviously, they wanted AJ DeBonsa to follow them. He didn't, but you lose Walker Kessler. So for me, this draft, I'm gonna have to give this a B tier. I know we ran out of slots, but I'll just throw them up there in the B tier. And now the last team, the Washington Wizards. You bring Trae Young back to a 4-year deal. You get DeAndre Ayton from the Lakers. And with your first overall pick, you get AJ DeBonsa. I mean, this offseason was perfect. I think you lose Jaden Hardy, who I said was one of the most underrated players in the league. But you keep Trae Young. They said they're not trading AD. You bring in AJ DeBonsa. Now you have your big 4 for the Wizards. I mean, how could you not give this an A tier grade for the Wizards this offseason. I think this was a great offseason for the Wizards. You have your big three now. I think the Wizards will make the playoffs next year. Comment down below who you think had the best offseason, and subscribe for more sports content.